Welcome to the book release reading for Bloodline by Ansley Clark and My Heart Is Not Asleep by Thomas A. Thomas. And I'm going to show you these two beautiful books. I hope you can see them. Two absolutely beautiful books. I'm Lana Hechtman Ayers, Managing Editor for MoonPath Press. I'd like to thank you for showing up for poetry as autumn brings cooling air and hopefully winds of change for the better. Poetry connects us as human beings. Sharing, listening to, and reading poetry inspires us toward compassion for one another and for ourselves. Our first reader is Ansley Clark. Ansley Clark is a writer and teacher from the Pacific Northwest. She holds an MFA in poetry from the University of Colorado at Boulder and is the author of a chapbook called Geography from Dancing Girl Press 2015. Her work has appeared in Poetry Northwest, Colorado Review, Bennington Review, and others. She is the director of the Writing Center at the Evergreen State College and teaches poetry and mixed media workshops at local community arts organizations, including Hugo House in Seattle. She lives in Olympia, Washington with her dog. Bloodline is her debut full-length collection, and it is an honor for MoonPath Press to present this work that walks us through deep and considered experiences with eloquence and grace, with honesty and vulnerability that allow the readers to be more honest with themselves and inspires positive action toward claiming of the self. Ansley, please unmute and read for us.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you so much. And thanks for being here, everyone. I see so many familiar faces and names in the Zoom void. And I know it's late for some of you on the East Coast. So it's really good. It's so nice to be here with everyone. And it's just, I said this at my reading in town a couple of weeks ago, but there is nothing like putting your work out there in book form to remind you that it truly is about community. Without community and readers and audience, there's like nothing out there. So this whole experience of having my first book out has been a huge reminder that it's about the community that's there to receive it. And I'm so grateful to Lana for making my beautiful first book. It's amazing. And I've just been, I'm glowing every time I look at it, and it's been amazing to work with you. And then Thomas, it's an honor to read with you. I was at your reading at Browsers on Saturday and cried so much. It was incredibly moving. So I'm just really happy to be here. And I just wanted to say before I start, it is entirely possible that my dog is going to make very strange noises and might possibly bark. So it's one of those Zoom things, and we'll just roll with it. Hopefully we're all used to that at this point. Okay, so I wanted to just preface what I'm reading with a few things about the form I found for these poems, and I will also offer the framing. So this book began as a meditation on the inheritance of intergenerational and familial systems, and it especially began as a meditation on genetic inheritance and specifically breast cancer. And the poems became a kind of grief work trying to process these fears, but it quickly opened up into a larger excavation of historical, institutional, cultural inheritance, and the ways that women in particular inherit the world, absorb and internalize the oppressive systems. And the question of the book became what is left of the self when we peel back all the layers of inherited, internalized narratives. And yeah, two things briefly about the form. I chose couplets for these poems because I found that I wanted to capture the speaker's mind in a state of rumination and grasping, which to me are two things that characterized a lot of grief, ruminating and grasping. And I found that the couplets created this sort of like repetitive circling, incantatory deepening around the questions of the book and the speaker's mind. And I also used these little pauses in between the phrases, which my graduate school mentor and I started calling interstitial pauses or interstices. And I wanted to read the definition of those, and then I'll read my poems. So interstices is an intervening space, especially a very small one. And the example sentence is sunshine filtered through the interstices of the arching trees, which I just find so beautiful. And I found that this use of space hopefully enacted the sort of wild leapings, wildly associative leapings of the mind, especially the ruminating mind. And the hope was that they also created space for the reader to bring in their own experience in that pause in the poem. Okay. So I'm going to read the first poem in the book, and the book is also playing, it will be a complete circle. And I'll read the first poem, and then at the very end of this reading, I'll read the last poem. This is called Returning in Late Summer to the Uncanny. Salt wet, collapsed orange, the air so full it's almost a real live human emotion, almost clothed it hangs. You might see a side of her that's difficult to see, my father says, as a deer gallops through the fluorescent tunnel fleeing wildfire. I've heard of deer inside the sea's curled edge who swim between islands, between worlds. In the weeks caring for my mother and the house, deer appear close 3 times, once in this fluorescent panic, then twice more standing around staring with chilly demeanors. Surely this must be a sign, I think, opening my box of wretched fables. But no other signs follow, leaving me to wake with a thirst for narrative. One morning, a 4-poster bed arrives with the tides, heaped with heavy blankets, under which lie a family of undetermined bodies, dead or sleeping. I am not certain. I turn away, covering my face. The real uncanny is a strange survival, finding a human presence where it shouldn't be, like opening the door of the house to find another house. Later, my mother cries softly in her bandages on the couch. If I must name it, this is a raw incubatory period. A looping uneasiness stalks each pooled night. The house on its hill exposed as bristle, the wounds inside what the stars vacuum inhales out and up. All right. I've thought many, I almost have that poem memorized. Sandy has this thing where she memorizes some of her poems when she reads, and it's very inspiring. So one of these days I'll have that memorized. Although you can't tell because it's Zoom, so I could have memorized that. This poem is called Lineage of Power, and my friend Kim, who's here, captured this poem so beautifully. She said that it's the secret world of women, which is exactly how I feel about it. A path through the bog lit by an unmetaphored and green starry feeling climbs down where some women keep its secret. Like nettles in cloth, there is no leader here, which confuses men who cover their eyes and deem certain inclinations impossible. One woman learns mistletoe's precarious edge and coaxes steaming cloth. Another can compel a specific animal to pursue the male object, to fairy desire. Some learn to preserve these abilities through the generations, like knives muted in wool, a line tossed in uncertain seawater. It's true that someday things will begin to die into their hot projections. A woman will look down into a watery cathedral and barely discern the shadows of sex. Thus, brambled into a mind, familiarized with restriction, this lessening will feel like the most feminine magic trick, and this fatigue a wet amulet, a battery light in an ill-lit century, where individuals purposeless, half-articulated, stand on every threshold as uncertain guests. Right. And I'm going to read a poem called Americana. And again, I have some family here again. And I said this at my reading, but this poem it's integrating several different family stories and experiences. So my family who's here is going to be like, that's not how that happened. But I've said this before, I'll say it again. I'm a poet, so I get to do this. I'm playing around with the truth. And it's a poem about America. Americana. Every night we hear the sound of someone running through the trees, as though something is trying to come unstuck, a trapped animal throwing itself at the unyielding edges. When my brothers investigate, they report no ghost here, just the neighbor boy running back and forth in the dark. No one comments on the strangeness of this event, or of what the darkness does to a person, how the systems disconnect us. But how little we know about our neighbors frightens me. Because some needs are unsolvable, my mother preserves old longings in me like pressed flowers. Eventually, I learn it is only acceptable to have a need if I can keep it to myself. Thus, when after 4 days without power, I hear a phantom panting in my ear, I think, of course, my ghost is wolfish hunger. And everyone knows a hunger chambered grows deranged, desert flung, like a voice in isolation. In the parceled land, the nation's steady vernacular of ownership and borders invents trespassing. At dusk, a high whistle splits the tree line. Unanswered, this call for an animal's return floats, a lonely fluorescence above our properties, now fractured as night comes. To watch my family, like all other families, participate in this system is to feel myself panic. The future's coin spins on one edge. This has happened many times before. Okay. I'm going to read a really short poem, and I'm reading it because Thomas, a couple weeks ago, sent me this poem paired with one of his beautiful pieces of photography. So I thought I'd read it at our shared reading. And the photo you sent with this poem really made me want to collaborate with you. It was so stunning. Recurring dream. I really need to have lunch with my mother before something crawls back. A question of water, a ladder into the canyon. Days descend like small moons on a system of ropes. I don't want anyone to know I'm in the bone flowers now, hugging the dark animal. All right. So I'm going to read I'm just checking the time and making sure I'm not, okay. I'm going to read a poem called Time Sickness, and this was a poem grappling with this idea of the Western world's sort of very linear, messed up relationship with time, how we view time as a straight line, we view it as a commodity and scarcity, there's never enough time. And I think because of that, we have a time anxiety. We have a lot of fear over time, especially in this country. And so this was kind of a meditation on time, and this phrase time sickness, which I've heard used to refer to folks in the Western world who experience a lot of anxiety over time. When my mother turns her back, but still she needs help with her hospital gown, so I glimpse the hard black lumps, the purple lines. When the surgeon steps back to admire not my mother, but his sculpting. When there is no room here to doubt the decision, though weeping I doubted it. This trade for longevity, another 30 to 40 years of her life, which is still not enough. When my mother can never die, because then I will die too. When a new era begins, and behind us we hear a darkness at the door, when blackberries perfume the hot August forest, when only one thing matters, though I cannot tell you what that is. When flinging myself from task to task and urgency accumulates inside my body as inflammation, and exhaustion feels like the only safe place. When the linear brain experiences time as guilt. When each year more debris blows into the basement as the earth takes it all back, and sickness is the only word we have for this process. Thus, we explain time by way of sickness and fear. When one day I will have to live without her, this is true. I am always grasping and never really learning. In the maze of illuminated bridges, one long grope in the wet streets, when it is incredible how many potential accidents do and do not occur daily, how gentleness arrives when least expected, and how people try to find one another inside crowds like heavy stars. When I so love who I love, bewildered by stillness, these repeated half-deaths, when will I find a different occupation? What will I do one day when my hands are so empty? All right. So I'm going to read I should have maybe changed the title of this because I'm calling this my portal poem. And I saw this as a turning point in the book. Lana, I just have to say, was like so helpful and supportive in helping me order these poems. I feel like I turned in the final manuscript to you, Lana, and I was just at this point where I was like, I don't know anymore. Take them. And you had some really beautiful suggestions for how to order the poems, which was very helpful. So I see this book as a kind of like turning and circling around the experience of grief. And I've heard grief described as a kaleidoscope where it's turning and you're always kind of looking at your experiences from a different angle, through a different pane of glass. And so the kaleidoscope is turning here, and this is a little bit of a portal where the book starts to transform. Nothing is as dark as an island. Like a loose horse on a northern beach, I am strange and stunned by my capacity for shape-shifting and by grief's transmutations, which are just the self's vowels released into oceanic darkness, where nothing is calculable, and the night's weight, a dark sapphire animal, drinks from the human world. The sound of wind or a wing beat, the Pacific's dark rise moves with a tender anarchism, shapeless at the bite of us. Courage, the little scrying tool says, and I am trying mostly, but for my white-knuckled grip at the edge of the dissolution of self, which is a soundless chasm opening. This fatelessness, which demands a release of power, nothing, not loyalty to family systems, nor to men, nor to some dying economic laws, dictations for what I am and what constitutes a life, can survive. I've heard that buried in every timeline are portals into others, which one day you might simply step through, only realizing much later that you did step through and were thus transformed. Okay. I am going to read, I'm going to read one more poem. Yeah, I'm going to read one more poem. And okay, so there actually are, I think I saw my Uncle David in the Zoom room. So they're actually like, my Uncle David might be able to pronounce this better than I am, because I think you might actually have some Hungarian. But this poem is about a family recipe, which again, I thought was like passed down from my mom and her grandmother, but it turned out this is a recipe that my uncle brought back, who's here, brought back from Budapest. Although, you know, it still could be a family recipe. The ancestors are over there somewhere. And this was a meditation I had on an inherited object, reflecting on the ways that that inherited object held meaning for me. And so the object was this recipe. Paprika szczerka. Soft underside of an animal, a shadowed glow, this golden orange broth swirled confectionery with sour cream, green peppers coaxed into translucence, paprika and oil, russet-colored as tiny liquid sunsets, pooling around the dark, salty meat, which has, since I was little, made my mouth water, and which my ancestors brought here, wrung out as dish rags alongside their histories, their medieval fatigue, and their unexamined determination to find safety in adhering to the rules of whiteness/violence. These prismed fragments sink like wreckage in the ocean-thick sleep of myself. So deeply that sometimes I freeze in the middle of a task, paralyzed with indecision and terror, or skip meals, or feel my mind suddenly crumple, fragment into grief, or my chest fill with bladed wings. Little panicked bird, what would you like to release? But I am trying to be tender and understand where the violent systems live inside my body. I fold boiled cabbage leaves into pale green packages like spring foliage, or like steaming propaganda pamphlets left in the rain. They fall open so soft with peppery meat and tomato, so bright red they are almost ancestral song, somatic. Inheritance is a waning oil, perhaps only spent energy's fumes. Here I am eating until full and taking up space as my grandmothers before me could not. Right, I will stop there. Thank you so much, everyone. Glad my pronunciation was okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ansley, for that gorgeous reading of your work. Now I'll introduce Thomas. Thomas A. Thomas, born in Illinois to a medical doctor mother and a ballet dancer father, spent a lot of time off by himself in the woods, prairies, and fields, day and night in all seasons. He attended the University of Michigan, where he studied with Donald Hall and Gregory Orr and workshopped poems with Robert Bly. He says after a couple of years of madness in New York City, and I can believe that, having come from New York, he made his way to the Pacific Northwest that has been his home for over 40 years. He is a board member for the Olympia Poetry Network and active in numerous online poetry and photography groups. My heart is not asleep regards his experience caring for his wife for over a decade up to the present time as she gradually succumbs to extreme early onset Alzheimer's disease. MoonPath Press is privileged to present this poignant and necessary debut collection. Please read for us, Thomas.
Thank you, Lana. And thank you, Ansley. Thanks everybody who's here. I had the pleasure of seeing Ansley's reading at Browsers, and certainly what I felt there was what she speaks of, community. It was a good showing, and also she shared the recipe that she just described to us. So more sharing of food and breaking of bread will follow. Just sort of an introduction. While I was thinking about this today, I saw a review that said this book was a morose elegy, and I don't think that will probably sell a lot of books, but and given the subject, I mean, it is something that people might assume about the book. But I also remembered what one of the early caregivers said after she'd been coming to work at our home for a while with Sean, and while I was working in my office and she was caring for Sean, she said, "When I come to work, I'm walking on sacred ground." And that's really what I want to accomplish with this book, is to show that, grief and sickness and pain, the only result is not sadness and suffering. The result can be love, no matter what, and spiritual growth. So that's what I hope comes of this book. But it does follow an arc from falling in love and before my wife's illness, and then tracking through the illness, and then ways that I dealt with it and helped her deal with the passages. But I'm going to start with a night poem, Around Us. A beam of full moonlight falls through the skylight and graces our pillow, our faces, lights up dust motes like stars turning silently above our bed. Reflected silver lights the high knotty pine ceiling and the knotty pine walls, each knot, you said, a galaxy. Around us lie our halos of moonlight. Around us drift the dusty stars. Around us turn the galaxies. Outside, as it is inside our beloved bodies. Light stirs the sacred matter. The atoms germinated, scattered by eons exploded and long gone dark stars. And then in the morning, love awakening. I wake warm and tangled with you under our tousled covers, come aware of your breathing like slow waves sinking into sand over and over. I open my eyes to the pre-dawn wonder of you, then close them, listening to my own breathing and twining with yours. From outside our window, A third sighing curls into my ears. There is now, here, your small breath, my small breath, and the great breath. And then I guess this is sort of a midnight terror. The Sirens Before Dawn. And this is an epigraph that is where the title is derived from, by Antonio Machado. No, my heart is not asleep. It is awake, wide awake, not asleep, not dreaming. 1. Some black hour past midnight, and I am dreaming at the rim of the vast silence of Odysseus, hearing those first fatal notes in a strange distance beyond his sight, when a sound enters slowly winding from some great darkness into my ear, base of my skull, down my spine, pierces my chest like an icy blade aching, something like a terrified moan, a whimper, a keening, a ghostly ululation wrung from the straining throat of my love, my wife, from some deep and ancient abyss. I gasp awake, hairs risen on my neck, adrenaline racing my heart as the sound echoes, reverberations fading as I reach across to gather her head on my shoulder. Everything is all right, my love. You're safe, you're warm and good. I am here, and I am not going anywhere without you, dear sweetly beloved. 2. Your forehead against my throat, your breathing the only measure I know of time. We sink in the warm dark where once so long ago I might have turned my lips to just touch the tiny hairs of your forehead, trace their way to your temple hollow, my breath warming the scent of your skin, your hair, the space behind your earlobe, as you, still under the blanket of sleep, turn ever so subtly toward me, arching and offering throat, collarbone, the valley between the breathing arcs of your breasts, your nipples stiffening between my lips as tongue tip traces tightened aureoles. Yes, and yes, our yeses growing and burning in that other life we had, that gone cosmos. Okay. I think I'm going to, echolocation. This is sort of a day in the life. My beloved says, please don't do that. Oh, that's not right. She's a nice person, wandering endlessly. Okay, thank you. That is bad. Today, a nice person. I'm sorry, the little baby. Do not go down there. That's bad. Be nice. Slowly, slowly. We got a weirdo here. How come? How come? Some of the people. Why? It hurts when you talk like that. Why are you talking bad? right over here. Honey, I say, I'm going to go outside to breathe some fresh air, take some pictures. Do you want to come with? Sorry, don't do that. Yep, thank you. I appreciate that, but I want to go home to my home. So I place my camera strap around my neck, step out on the concrete porch, escaping down the gravel driveway, 50 feet to street, 50 more to bluff above the still saltwater cove. Tide just turning to ebbing, one seal hunting, anchovies scattering on the surface, crashing kingfisher catching and blue heron spearing fish, crows and woodpeckers calling, the moon just peeking through high clouds, a grace of sunlight on the wall of still green trees across the water, and me wanting only to slip underwater, follow Seal Woman down and down to her dark peace. But I walk back, open the storm door. I want to go home, and it hurts. It hurts. Oh, I need to go home. She's a nice person, wonderful person, and happy to have it. Where is Thomas? I surely love you. I surely do. Love, if you don't mind if I say hi. Hi, honey bunny. I want to go home. So let's see. Okay. And that was thankfully the one of the more terrifying parts of the experience, where there's a psychotic phase. And it was thankfully short in my wife's case, because as I say, her inner goodness has never dimmed. It's always survived. But we had to separate at one point, and that's the right word. The right word is not shroud, not today at least, and not cocoon, though the cloth is wound round the body on the hospital bed. No, the word is only sheet, right for this first day of a separate bed in the guest room at the other end of our rented house. The right word is not rain, though the radar says so. Not this afternoon, when imagined droplets touch skin as I mow late grass, dandelions, not drizzle, not mist, but virga, rain that falls yet does not. Good morning, my love. You try to say this as if it were not the last time. Here's your glasses as you slip them on her nose, again as if. Then you have her sitting, yes, on the edge of the bed, knowing, and brush her hair long and slowly back of her shoulders. And when her eyes close, you touch her lips with a strawberry, which is this one and only moment, all and everything we know. Okay. One more. Something turns in the cells of ferns and birds and blackberries under the burnt orange sky. Smoky air erases the idea of horizon where I've walked to the liminal zone of beige grass and green woods. Thorny vines have climbed among hawthorn trees and alder saplings, and the purple fruit rests there. I am not so much picking berries as touching to find those that give themselves to my cupped palm. It seems I have always been doing this for my dearly beloved, finding sweetness at the edge of somewhere. Air hot and smoky from distant fires, sun orange high in the sky, not dream, not nightmare, incarnation. Thank you. That'll be it until our closing poems.
Thank you for that beautiful reading, Thomas. And I think and I would be remiss if I did not say this, but just regarding that review, I think any reader of poetry would be hard pressed to find a book exuding more love than yours does. It's just full of love and beauty. And that's part of the experience. And that's why we're poets, because we share what it is to be human. So thank you. Now I'd like to invite folks to raise their virtual hands if you'd like to chat with our poets or ask a question. I have a couple questions, but I can hold off until if anyone wants to speak, please raise your virtual hands and I can find you and we can have that chat. And I'm not seeing any virtual hands. Well, I'm just going to start out with my first question, which is that each of you, the collections are governed by powerful emotions, and I wonder, since you both handle those emotions and the powerful content that you're dealing with, whether it be institutionalized, generational issues, or whether it be the illness of a beloved, you handle the poems with such grace and aplomb, and you make it look easy. I'm wondering if it's more difficult to write these poems that bridge powerful emotions, requiring lots of drafts and rewrites, or does it just come out that way? Who would like to answer? Ansley?
I was going to say, Thomas, feel free to answer first if you'd like. Yeah, well, I can say that, so a couple things. I think that I can tell when I'm getting close to something that I should be writing, when something inside of me is going, ooh, I don't want to touch that. I really don't want to touch that. I heard a writer a long time ago say something about how whatever we don't want to write about is what we probably should be writing about. So I think though the like difficulty of writing about certain things became like a motivating, propelling force forward. And I also think that in order to craft this book, I really did start thinking about the speaker as a character. Of course, the I is like also myself, but it is also not myself, and it became a character's experience. And while it's from like a deep place of truth inside of me, I also was crafting a world for this character. So I think like that level of just like by the time I worked on this book for so long, and by the time I got to the place where it's out there in the world in book form, I had some distance from everything. Yeah.
Do you think I'm just going to follow up. Do you think was at the point that you saw it as a collection, as a whole entity, that made you able to do that, to put a little distance and create the character of the story, of the collection?
Yeah, I think so. I think at a certain point it became, yeah, again, I think it's about like community, and how can I use this to connect with community? I'm expressing my experiences, but also the goal here is to connect with others. And so I'm crafting a world to bring others in. So it's not just the straightforward eye, the complicated eye of poetry, as my brother, who's very smart, has called it.
Oh, that's great. That's a great term. Yeah. How about you, Thomas?
Well, I'd say in my case, I needed to make small pieces of the story to just make them able to be absorbed at all. It's such a huge daily task and daily daily dealing with despair and just the grind. And so and these were hard topics, and so it would feel like I needed to find a gentle way into it. Once once I once I found the handle, maybe on a given thing, a way into it, then some of these started to write themselves. They just flowed out. But so, you know, the but that half a page of poetry took a month to experience. And so it's all condensation. It's all but it's wanting to capture it. It's wanting to stay present, not run away, and not just fall in the corner weeping, but to be present, so that I knew I wanted to share it. I wanted people to know about this experience. And I also knew other people are experiencing it on a daily basis, and they just may not find that handle, that way to share it with other people. So
Yeah.
it's also a way to stop time. I mean, some of the what I perceive as beautiful moments, I wanted to keep them. I wanted to make the emotional picture of that moment, so I could come back to it too.
Yeah, you mentioned the word spiritual earlier, and it I think it feels like a spiritual experience to be with one who is grieving, and also giving voice to those people that have experienced it themselves, that didn't have a voice, didn't have the voice of this poet, to be able to say that and to see that they're not alone. There's a James Baldwin quote about that. It's when he, read in books. I'm paraphrasing. James Baldwin said it's when he read in books about the suffering of others, he knew that he was not alone. And, that's what he needed to do. Yeah, and I feel like, writing in the midst of grief and the midst of ongoing grief is such a difficult thing. And that you were able to be present for for not just obviously present for the beloved, but also present for the making of something to share with others of this experience is just an incredible feat. And, the poems just speak to that, to the beauty of what you accomplished. So I want to thank you both for these books, which I feel, I'm biased, of course, are a really important collection. And I'm just so honored our press was able to bring them forward. I think we have a question from Carmen. Did you want to unmute, or a comment from Carmen Germain, another MoonPath Press author, please?
Yeah. Thomas, your poems, you're right. They make someone feel not alone in the struggle. Did it help you to be able to express this? And did it help you when you were writing it? And did it help you to overcome, if you did, have any kind of sense of fear that you would grow to resent the position you were in? I hope my question is clear.
Well, it was a way too of dealing with fear. That one echolocation, that was a frightening time for me. And when humans get frightened, they tend to get angry too. It was a way of absorbing, well, making something constructive out of those negative emotions, and making something that that, again, like Ansley talks about, it's about community, and it was about a way to share with colleagues and coworkers and friends what we were going through, but by spreading that grief out a little bit, it made the burden lighter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it looks like Sandy would like to ask a question or make a comment.
Both, actually. Well, first of all, I mean, you are two people that are such of my heart, and I loved your readings, and Lucy Brock Broido talks about like the terrible crystals. I think these poems just emulated the absolute best of what she means by that, because she means that the poems and what is contained in a poem, is so exquisite. It transcends its own terrors and turns it into something like a literal turning, like that kaleidoscopic turn into something beautiful. And I just feel like the two of you are masters of that. And my question has to do with the fact that I'm familiar with both of your work. I've heard your work. I love it. I love your work. I love your poems. And yet, and in your poem Love Awakening, Thomas, you talked about you read about that there was the one sigh and the second sigh that became like a third thing. And my experience of hearing you read together is, we'll talk about the uncanny, like the way you came together to read. Hearing you in combination, I felt like I experienced a third thing. And I'd just like to hear how you're each feeling about reading with the other person and kind of being, I don't know, a mirror or something for each other. Yeah, I hear a lot of readings, and I'm so struck by you in combination and in juxtaposition. And I'd just love to hear how the experience has landed with you, with each other.
Well, I'd like to jump in and say something. Thank you so much, Sandy. Sandy is one of the best readers, seers of poetry I've ever encountered. Like that, I'm so glad you're here, and that means so much. And I just wanted to say one funny thing, which is I realized halfway through this that so Thomas and I did not coordinate our outfits for this. And yet we are both wearing black turtlenecks. Um, yeah, which is a poet outfit. Like that's what poets wear. So I feel like that's my answer to your question, Sandy. But I'll just say, like, I think for me, it's just like the worst part of grief is that is feeling alone. And I think like mirroring Thomas's work, reading alongside Thomas, hearing your work, really just is evidence for me of touching on the collective experience. Like the thing that has, makes me feel better when I'm experiencing these intense emotions is that I am touching on a collective experience, loneliness, grief. It's like that is like the sacred work. So I'll let you respond.
And I'd say Ansley too was speaking for people who couldn't necessarily speak those truths. That was a common thing. And reading her book and enjoying that, there's certain images and phrases and elements that we do have in common that are common to our experience and hopefully everyone's. And so, yes, definitely, I have the feeling that there's a synergy between us too. Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah. And it's just an honor to read together.
Thank you, Sandy, for that great comment and question. Kate, you have your hand raised as well. Unmute yourself, Kate.
My great appreciation to both poets that have brought us a deeper sense of our own heart and chest and breath and feeling and movement and ability to get up and live life each day. I was honored for Thomas to show wonderful times of walking in the woods with Sean and holding someone else's changes in my heart was a way to remember what my family has gone through from my grandmother and her son and other family members, and realizing that you can't stow it away. It's with you, it's within you. And Thomas, you give us a wonderful line. I haven't read your book yet, but the line of one of your earlier caretakers who said to you, "Every day that I come here, I feel that I'm walking on sacred ground." And that's what I'm expressing to you, Thomas, is that you have opened up a beautiful, beautiful path for people to be able to read and maybe put the book down and go back to and pick it back up and read it again and be brave. And you have given us the idea that there is that moment where you do need to go out into your space, our space in life, that we take that walk, that we bring our camera and we leave someone that is so close to us and needs us, but it's time to take a break and see the virga, the rain that comes down and does not touch the ground. But we always look for a greater space. So again, Ansley, you also brought me into many places, and I feel that I can meet my next day in a stronger way. Thank you, both of you.
Oh, thank you, Kate. Beautiful, beautiful comments. Thank you so much.
Love.
That's lovely. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you.
It's a blessing.
I just had a quick question for both of our poets, which is something I want to be able to ask every poet I know, which is at MoonPath Press, we allow our authors to pick their own cover art. And I'm just curious about if you want to say a little about your cover art. I know Thomas is his photo, and Bloodline is I believe a friend of Ansley's. Just sort of how you felt in selecting a photo for the cover, and maybe why that one connected to your particular book. I'm always interested in that. Thomas, would you like to answer that?
Well, in my case, it was important to have a photograph of my own. But it's about the darkness and the light and the high contrast. And the light is, I mean, the darkness is very dark. But in the light, you can see the beauty. And there's a kind of a blossoming that I felt in my heart staying awake, and my heart blossoming in the darkness by being present, by staying with it. So that was why I liked that. And that flower, that particular, this Magnolia stellata, or star magnolia, was a favorite of Sean's too.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful photograph, and it is very much what you said, the contrast of the darkness and the light, and it's the beauty shines through. And Ansley, this really stunning cover art. Just beautiful, just beautiful.
Yeah, I love your cover, Thomas. I love that photograph, and I was so excited about my cover. It was my cousin is a visual artist, and we have collaborated on workshops together. And the book, a lot of what ended up in the book came out of some collaborative workshops that we taught together on inheritance, and some sort of mixed media art projects we did together. So I asked her to do the cover, and it's embroidered, and I'm always worried I'm going to get this wrong. It's a neuron, which are the cells that make up the nervous system. And then there's dendrites coming off of it, which we felt like looked like roots or tree branches. So it feels like connected to family systems, inheritance, one's roots. And then also the neuron is the part, if somebody here understands this better than me, feel free to correct me later, but it's the part that receives information from other neurons and from the environment. And it's the soma, which is essentially the system that makes up the body and is inherently connected to all other systems that it's receiving input from. So because the book is about the self receiving and absorbing the world, in all the good ways and all the difficult ways, it just felt really, her art really resonated with me.
Yeah, it's really a special image for this book and very powerful. I mean, both covers are really powerful and beautiful.
And there's an interstitial space between the dendrites from one neuron to the next.
Yeah.
Yes, you're
The
right.
synapse,
Yes.
Look at
Yes.
that.
the
Look at
leap,
that.
the
Yes.
information leaping across the synapse.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Before we close, I'd like to ask each of you to read another poem for us. Thomas, would you go read us a last poem for the evening?
Oh, I changed courses. I think I'll read a short one. Death's Questions. Can you hold her now deformed feet with the same reverence you cupped her breasts in longing? Will you still kiss those affectless lips as fervently as when they were warm and kissed you back? Remembering that restored turquoise earring you hung on her lobes, do you touch her ears devotedly still? As she leaves you with my shadow, are you able to smooth the sheets as you always did in love?
Beautiful. Thank you, Thomas. Ansley?
Yeah. I'll read one of the last poems in the book, The Wild Under the Wilderness. Touching the dune grasses and their tall glow is an easy way to locate oneself. I have a pile of something here, elemental nouns which disperse like seasonal insects. Quinces poach in pink cinnamon syrup, plant cuttings on the windowsill embroider water with soft roots, and suddenly I am more committed to everything than I realized. Isn't this just so consistently my weakness that I want to stay here, I mean, on Earth, accumulating these little houses, and I tie this old childhood love around my waist while I wade out farther and I wade out farther.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Thomas A. Thomas and Ansley Clark. Thanks to all of you in our audience for being here. A poem is only ever truly complete when it has a listener or a reader. I hope you'll support our poets by getting copies of their books available through the poets themselves or your favorite bookshops, either online or brick and mortar. And I hope we'll see you on Saturday, November 2nd at 3 p.m. Pacific time for the next MoonPath Press reading featuring Glenna Cook and Carrie Taylor and their new collections. Until then, may you find poetry everywhere you look, and may you all experience peace. Bye for now.